Today we are here to talk about Teams and the architecture. I'm an architecture geek, and here is my cat, Dorian Gray, helping with the conversation today. You know, as soon as you start doing something, a cat's going to get right in the middle of it. All right. So thank you for being here today, being part of this conversation. I am Joy Apple. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm also a modern workplace strategist with the Pate Group. I've been with Pate Group almost 5 years now. My time here, I've really delved into the collaboration platform, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, and then all the goodies that those applications touch. So all the things you can do with Forms and Yammer and mapping your business processes for Power Automate. My number one goal and job role is to help people get from where they are today, whether that's classic SharePoint, legacy on-prem SharePoint, Google Drive, Dropbox, into modern Microsoft 365. I've worn several hats during my time working with Microsoft products and technologies, but I have to say right now is the most exciting time to be working with these tools. They are fantastic. The things we dreamed about being able to do 10, 12 years ago are just button clicks away now. So that's pretty exciting. All right. So let's jump in. Please don't be shy. As we go through this, if you have any questions at all, feel free to come off mute, ask your question. If you're like Sherry and you're doing your cardio while you watch, feel free to put it in chat. That's not a problem either. All right, so I'm kind of a architecture nerd these days. I really find a lot of interest and fun in getting in there and building out logical information architecture. Now, back in the day, information architecture was going to be our folder structure on the file shares and our FTP sites and things like that. Then we evolved into SharePoint, and information architecture started to be SharePoint sites and our site collections and our content databases and our policies and things like that. Yes, that all is still absolutely a massive part of information architecture. But today, and for the last few years now, Microsoft Teams is a very big part in our information architecture. So the way we create our teams alongside our team sites absolutely impacts information architecture. Security is going to play a role. Retention, security labels, data loss prevention, all those things bundle together and play a role in it. Today, we're just going to focus on architecture and the things that go along with that. But the first question, just in case anyone here is new to Teams, I have the what the heck is Teams anyway, and why should I care slide. But Teams sounds kind of fluffy at first, but it's a chat-based communication platform. And I will confess, when they rolled Teams out about 4.5 years ago, and that was the first messaging I really heard, replacement for, actually, they really weren't talking about a replacement for Skype at that point in time. But, it was kind of like Skype, and it was this chat platform and all that jazz. You could hear my eye roll. I rolled my eyes really hard at that because honestly, in my opinion, I was like, does the world really need one more chat tool? No, it doesn't. But then I opened it up and I got in there and I started clicking around and I started seeing files, and I kind of had a little hissy fit on that until I realized what was really going on behind the scenes there. Group chat, the chat inside of Teams, the way you could build these workspaces so teams could come together and work on their focus tasks and projects. Okay. It's also a place where we can get together and have meetings, just like this one. Live events, webinars is rolling out. So we have chat, we have document management. Florida, we'll talk about that more as we go. Collaboration, meetings, and all kinds of other stuff that kind of start to roll into the platform. There are two basic types of teams inside of Microsoft Teams. The public teams, not worldwide, But inside of the organization, anyone in the organization can search for inside of Teams and join public teams. Basically, it's a Microsoft 365 group that's open and anyone can join into it. And then there are private teams. There's restricted security. So you have to be explicitly added to the team or given a code that you can use to join the team in order to be a member of the team. So we've got public and private teams inside of Microsoft Teams. Now, there are several components of our teams that maybe are super obvious when we first get in there and start looking around, but then there's some that really aren't. So what we see, what is the makeup of our teams is going to be the chat or the posts. They used to call it chat, and now it's posts inside of a team. You have that files tab where you can get to any of the files that are part of that channel in your team. We're going to talk more about channels as we go. You have the ability to create additional tabs. And I'm going to tell you, tabs kind of bring a little bit of, dare I say, magic to your team. On our SharePoint sites, you use links, buttons, right? The quick links, your hero web part images, all those things to be able to link to other items, other resources, other sites. Inside of Teams, we use tabs for that. So I can tab to additional resources, files, and things that I need. And then we have channels. Channels are truly the organizational construct of your team. It's almost like for any of our old school SharePoint people here, it's almost like a site collection was a collection of sites. A team is a collection of channels. What we don't necessarily see at first inside of Teams is the fact that there is a Microsoft 365 group that's there. That acts as a security service, and it really is great from an admin perspective. So when I create a team, what I'm really doing is creating that group and some assets that go along with it. Once I'm added to that group, I get access to the team, the connected SharePoint site. If we add a planner plan, I get access to that. The shared OneNote, the group inbox, there's a shared calendar, all the good stuff. And that group provisions access to all of those Teams associated things. SharePoint. We don't see SharePoint at first when we start working with Teams. Like I said in that previous slide, I kind of pitched a little bit of an internal hissy fit. I hope it was internal. I don't think I was on a call with anyone. When I saw files in Teams, I stopped and I went, I'm sorry. What have they done? Are you telling me that now we're going to have users putting things in SharePoint and in Teams? And I kind of had a moment until I clicked and I saw that there was a magic little button that said open in SharePoint. And I took a deep breath and I went, oh, okay. This is not something in addition to SharePoint. This is something that's coming alongside SharePoint and kind of streamlining that document sharing piece that we as our team could use. That Outlook inbox is there because that Microsoft 365 group, right? You get an email address. So you can email to the team. You can have an inbox that team can utilize as a shared resource. So all kinds of good things come along with a team, even though we may not see those on the surface at first. So one thing Teams is not, and Sharon, I think you actually have a session that is, if not all about this, that includes this, right? Teams is not a file management tool. It's not a document management tool. It's not a file storage tool. In fact, nothing really lives in Teams, but Teams makes it very easy to get to the things that we use, the documents that we as a team want to work on. I can see some of that metadata, but if I really want to start using versioning, things like that, actually you can activate flows now, trigger those from inside of Teams. But the versions and those document management features, I may actually want to go to SharePoint to get to a lot of those. These two tools work hand in hand, but those files don't live in Teams in any way whatsoever. It's kind of like a wormhole. In fact, I kind of have a pet peeve when we talk about migrating to Teams. I get it, and I use that phrase from time to time, but it's really not a very true statement. We do migrate to SharePoint. It's still there. Teams isn't, and this was a debate a couple of years ago, Teams isn't going to take over or do away with SharePoint because it uses SharePoint to be document storage. In fact, when I'm inside my team and I click on that open in SharePoint, or the Files tab, I see open in SharePoint, we see we've still got all those features that we mentioned that we've always had from time to time. So we've got our Teams, and then we've got SharePoint marrying to it, basically, to give us a place for enhanced document management and communication. So now I can chat in Teams while we co-author documents together. I don't have to have a meeting. We don't have to do the file sharing. We don't have to do the screen share. We can literally do all of that in one place together, and it really is fantastic, especially in this virtual world where you've got kids and parents and pets all in the same room at the same time all day, every day. Really can help streamline those processes. So let's take a step or 10,000 up and look at everything from the top down. So we'll take a sneak peek at our architecture really quick. And I'm going to show you what the ideal architecture would be. Before I flip to this next slide, any questions, comments, or fun stories before we move along? Okie dokie. So modern architecture is flat architecture, and it's getting flatter every day. Microsoft recommends that we avoid subsites. In fact, if I have a subsite, I can't associate a team with that. So I'm not going to get a lot of really good modern functionality with subsites. I want to create everything as a top level site inside of, I was hoping, oh, here's something we don't get in Present in Teams is I don't get my magnifying glass. Boo. Okay. Everything inside of our SharePoint architecture should be its own standalone top level site. And so this is probably very small for you, and apologies for that. But when I come in and I look at architecture for an organization, the home site, we call it the home page, but we know that's a whole site. Probably in this modern world, that's going to be a communication site. Standalone, nothing lives under it. Everything's sibling sites in the tenant. Human resources. They need a place where they can share information with everybody in the organization, right? We've got to be able to see open enrollment documents, submit forms, get information. HR puts that information out. We would go to a communication site, probably, hopefully, that is shared with everyone in the organization. It's its own standalone site. It's going to be /site/human resources. But then HR needs places where they can work as a department away from everybody else in the organization. I have no business seeing, my coworkers' personal human resources information, all that PII that's out there. So HR needs probably multiple team sites to be able to come together as those business units, those functional areas of HR. So we may see HR get a wellness site, a benefits site, maybe an employee focus site, right? Reviews and things like that happen. They may have a cross-functional site with accounting for things like payroll, right? So for everywhere we need a place for security to be present, to bundle up that content for those functional areas, we create a SharePoint site, and more than likely Teams. So then that team has the place where they can talk. All that stuff that they used to send to each other in email now happens in the appropriate channels inside of their team. And that content is organized in those files inside that document library in SharePoint. So it does start to scale out pretty darn wide. And I know at first we start to think, holy moly, that is a lot of sites. If I'm not creating the HR team site collection with a subsite for every site, then I'm creating a lot of site collections or top level sites. You use your whatever term you prefer. Yes, you are. And it definitely feels like we're going to come into the admin center and it's going to be team sites everywhere. But there have always been that many team sites. We just didn't see them in the admin center. Now, if we go take those classic sites, maybe you're in SharePoint Online, but it's still classic, still those deeper site structures in your site collection, break those out. Create modern top level sites, move the content over, right? Create a team that creates the site for you, move the stuff over. Libraries, break those folders out. This is an unpopular opinion, but oh, Sharon, you won't mind this. Folders are the F word inside of SharePoint. We want to use them as sparingly as possible. So we want to really look at the architecture, not just for our sites, but inside of our sites, especially when Teams is coming along. Because if I go to the Files tab in Teams and I've got a nest of folders in there, how am I going to be able to go to the Posts section of my team? um, Drop a document in there, leave a little message, and then upload it, right? Hit send. It's going to send to the root of that Files tab. If you need it to go into one of those subfolders in Files, now you got to go in there, grab it, and move it around. It's too much work, right? If it's a folder in your old architecture, make it a channel in Teams. A channel is still a folder, so you still get it if you need it. I mean, I wish it hadn't have worked out that way, but it did. So just everywhere you see a folder, think, should this be a channel? If I'm organizing according to it, do I need to have conversations about it? You can have channel conversations, right? So then you start to streamline your content and your communication. And it starts to sound so overwhelming, especially when you're like, okay, lady, now I've got to break out subsites. I need to flatten out my libraries a little bit. Guess what? If those subsites were inheriting from the parent site, now you need to build out the permissions for those. But it's okay, because once we do that, we are going to be experiencing a lot less frustration with SharePoint. Because now in the admin center, if you're an admin, you go there, you see all of your sites lined out for you. Nothing is hidden in those deep subsites that you couldn't see previously in the admin center. You're going to have a lot less fewer, dare I say, if we are just really doing awesome, zero issues with granular permissions, because I'm building those sites for the permissions they need. I don't have to go back and poke holes in my security. Oh, but well, we want accounting to come in just to this site too, but they can only get to 3 libraries, just this library, that library, and that. Nope. Go create a cross-functional team in Team site for accounting and HR. Let them do that there. Maintain the integrity of your permissions inside of your HR sites. And if you undo all those nested folders, odds are you're going to do a little bit of a permissions review and go, oh, well, this was the folder we let accounting in. I'll go put that on the accounting site. Now I don't have broken permissions in my library. Now people aren't getting frustrated because they're clicking a link and they can't get to the stuff because we haven't added them where the permissions are broken. It really starts to clean up a lot of mess that we had in the older ways that we used to architect our SharePoint sites and site collections. If we don't nest folders and just go nuts and go like 30 deep, you're not going to have to worry about breaking your URL length limit. It's just not an issue anymore. If, as I'm talking through this, and you're thinking about creating channels for most of those sub folders, and you're like, geez, that's a lot of channels. It could be, but you get 200 channels inside of your team. If you think you're going to break that, call Sharon. If Sharon's too busy, I mean, I'll say it, you could call me, we're friends, we'll understand. Maybe there's some ways that that could be consolidated. Maybe some of those are really cross-functional teams. Have the conversation. If you start thinking about breaking out subsites and you're like, I don't know about that. That's a lot of sites. I don't think I can have that many sites. You get 2 million these days. You're probably going to be fine. If you think you're going to bust that limit, call Sharon and me both at the same time because we want to see that, right? You're probably going to be fine. Come on, slides. Click. Thank you. All right, so let's talk now about how Teams is for teamwork, because we all know Teams work makes the dream work. Yes, terrible Teams pun. Any questions before we start moving forward? Fabulous, fabulous. All right, so back in the olden days, a whole 3, 4 years ago, we had our traditional team sites, whether they were classic or I think 2018 is that when the modern sites started rolling out. Traditionally, we would go to our team site for our department or our group or our project specific stuff, right? We had flows, we had tasks, maybe contracts were there and they would go through reviews or policies would update it, all that. And traditionally, we built things out the old way. That top level site would have the widest permission, like everyone or most people could come in. And then as we built our sub-sites down, the permissions would get tighter and smaller and fewer people, right? Become more niche. Team sites traditionally have been the more tighter controlled sites on the intranet. And we used our SharePoint owners, members, visitors, groups, and all those, fancy ones that we came up with in between. Okay, awesome. Well, since that's how we've always used team sites is for that team-centric work, it absolutely makes sense then that as we bolt Teams on to our team site, it's a match made in heaven because we're still going to get alerts if you want those. Use your flows, create custom metadata. You can get to those inside of Teams now. It's pretty fantastic. You can share your team or department announcements inside of Teams. You could bring your news pages in a tab. We're already doing meetings there. In fact, most folks that really haven't done much with Teams yet, they are using Teams for meetings. And that's where we start getting comfortable with the functionality and the button clicks. But wait, if my slide would advance, yay, it didn't do what I wanted it to. But wait, there's more. So we take all of that, bundle it together with the stuff we do in Teams, and we get collaboration that is enhanced beyond what we ever had before. For instance, messages in our channels are going to involve everyone on the team. That's powerful. I will confess, when I'm working on something, I've got a question and I need someone to bounce it off of at my company. I've got maybe 3 people on a team of 20 that will be my go-to to reach out to, just because we happen to be on projects together the most. We have similar train of thought. We just gel well together. So those are going to be the people I go to. And when I do that, I am cutting off the benefit of getting the input of those other 17 or 18 people. I'm just going to those same people over and probably annoying them at the same time. It's like, geez, can't you ask somebody else this question? But if I put the question in the team where everybody that's part of that team is, now I'm opening up the floor to everybody's expertise and experience that I don't know about. They have the opportunity to come in. That's where true collaboration starts to happen. So instead of just going to those 2 or 3 people on those long email threads, bring it into Teams. Once it's in Teams, those channels and the kind of those social features that we get there are so inviting. It's so conducive to chat. if I see an email thread and I'm just a CC on there and people are going back and forth and maybe it's 4, 5, 8 emails deep in the thread, I'm probably not going to chime in. Mostly because it's email and you get so much email every day, right? Do you really want to be the 9th reply all, the 10th reply? I just don't. But if it's in Teams, I will absolutely reply. And I'll probably try to come up with the most clever GIF I can think of to enhance the message, right? Because, yeah, it makes it more fun. There's no rule that says work cannot also have fun moments, right? So now we're personalizing this remote communication. The whole team is involved now, or at least the ones that feel they have something to say. So again, your information is expanded, your collaboration is expanded, and you're truly communicating together as a team. You can search your team chats. You can use Control F and do keyword searches, or you can search for messages from a specific person inside of particular channels. There's a lot of good search capability right there inside of Teams that sometimes feels like it's lacking inside of Outlook. And when I bring all of my internal teamwork, department work into a team in Teams, feels redundant. All those files are going to be organized into the appropriate channels. I hope if we're doing well with our organization, we'll look at that in just a minute. So I don't have to go back to Outlook and expand those little tiny arrows, the drop downs to find where that attachment was actually originally attached, right? I go to my team. If this document is about deployment planning, I go to the deployment planning channel. It's going to be in the files tab. Or if I'm super lazy, and I'm super lazy a lot of the times, I'll actually go to the SharePoint start page, right? You just click the icon and the page with your news and your recent and frequent sites. I'll search for what I'm looking for there. And I know it's searching for every nook and cranny inside of SharePoint and Teams that I have access to, and I'll find the document. If I don't remember, I can just go there. So I have options for how I find my stuff, but if we're really good at naming conventions and organization in Teams, finding your content just gets that much easier. Any questions or comments? Fun stories? Knock jokes? I'm open. Okay. So when we're digging into the SharePoint and the Teams document management piece, like I said earlier, really the architecture of your team is its channels. And every channel you have in Teams is a folder inside of that team site documents library. At Pate Group, it's almost too easy. It's almost too easy because as a consultant, almost everything I do is project-based. And honestly, it's like cheating because building out those channels kind of does its own work. A client comes in, we create a team for that client. So if you work with customers or you have projects, you can pivot that to your world and say, okay, when I have a project, I could create a team for that project, right? A team for your functional area for your department. Now we know we're going to get general. General is Teams' version of shared documents in SharePoint, right? It's there and you can use it for the content that applies to every aspect of your team, not just specific channels. You can use that to hold maybe your monthly team meetings and just have channel meetings. But then we create a channel for every scope of work we do for a customer. So on the screen, you'll see I've got deployment planning, I've got a private channel, implementation and migration is there. Those are the things we're doing for a customer. So deployment planning is typically the first thing I do in a customer engagement. Go in, assess the environment, and make recommendations for moving forward. So when I'm making my recommendations in my documentation, I wouldn't put that in the migration channel. I wouldn't put that in the onboarding flow channel because it's about deployment planning. I'm going to put it in the deployment planning channel, right? The organization is built out there. If I want to talk to my team about deployment planning, right? I go to that channel. I don't have to go dig through, 6 weeks worth of emails to find the information. The whole history of our conversation will be there inside of that channel. Now, the exception to those channels that show up as folders inside of the documents library is going to be private channels. Those will not show up in that team site's documents library because private channels get their own SharePoint site, whole SharePoint site, just for that one private channel. I have opinions on that. And sometimes my opinion differs day to day. But the reason why that is, it feels kind of overblown, but the security best practice is you secure the largest object possible. And when you're securing the largest object possible, you're securing a site. Because I'm saying I have content, and this content is super sensitive. Not everyone on the team's allowed to see it. So I need a secured location to put it. And team says, okie dokie, I'm going to go make a site for you. You still get to it in your team's list, but you would have to go elsewhere to get it on the SharePoint side of the world. I have come across several organizations that kind of struggle with that. I once had to help a group re-architect a department team because they created the team. They were having all of their team conversation in general, and then every functional area of their department, they created a private channel. And after about 3 weeks, I think, of just kind of slamming their head on their desks because it was just frustrating, they called me like, we can't get the planner plan in anywhere. We can't tab to the notebook. I can't. I'm like, let's talk about it. You can't do that because you've dissected this team into about 12 different sections, and you're not allowed to share resources because those resources has common permissions and the channels don't. So let's talk about it. Let's do a little mini deep dive into when should I have a private channel or when should it just be a public standard channel? Let's pretend I got stuff. Let's pretend I've got this box of things, this stuff. And I'm trying to decide if the contents of these documents should go into a standard channel or should it be a private channel where only certain people can see it. So 2 questions is a good place to start. So the stuff that's in here, the people that I want to see it, are they all part of this same existing team? And is it a breach of security if everyone on the team sees it? Okay, let's say first time out, yeah, they're all on the same team. They're all already in HR, and there's an all HR team site, right? And it's really not a big deal if everybody on the team sees it, but not everybody on the team cares about it. So I'm just going to create a private channel, only add the people, so that way it's not in the way for everybody else. Don't do that. It's a kind thought, right? You're trying to declutter something for your team, and that's admirable. But we need to teach people how to show or hide channels. Security best practice, right? If it's not a breach of security, then we don't need to put security around it. You're just going to frustrate the administration of it later. So if it's not a big deal for security and everybody's already in the team, that's a standard channel, and the people that don't care about it can go hide it, and it mutes the notifications. Cool. Okay, so let's back up and let's say next scenario, is everybody on the team already there? And you say no. I need to bring in a few other people from another department so they can work on this with HR, but they can't see everything else in HR. We don't need to go any further because you can't do that right now. Another type of channel is coming. You'll be able to do that. But today, a private channel, you cannot bring extra people in because if you do that, you're bringing them in through the whole team. If we need to bring in some people to see this, we go to a cross-functional team. Bring in the people you need from that other team and the people you need from the existing one, let them work together there. All right, sometimes the answer is both, kind of, sorta. yeah, everybody that needs to see the stuff here, they're already in my team, but it is not cool if everybody on the team sees this. It would be bad, not good. That's your magic spot. That's your cubby hole. That's your private channel. So on this previous slide, that would be this Excelsior PM channel. That was one I built as an example where the project manager and maybe the billing folks got together to talk about invoicing and billing for the customer. And trust me, as a consultant, I don't want to see that stuff. I don't want to be a part of that stuff. I shouldn't see that stuff. So they do that there while the rest of us are just working on what we do as consultants. Oh, that was a lot of words. I'm going to kind of glance at chat real quick, see how we're doing. Reframe general as small talk. Yeah. Okay, doing good. Cool. All right. Moving forward now. Tabs. So we've got channels where we organize our content and our conversation. If you're going to think about a subset of your content enough to make a folder for it, make a channel for it. Because again, odds are you're probably talking about it too. Use tabs. Tabs are fantastic. I'm debating on whether or not I would officially call tabs part of architecture. I think I would because it's a button there and it's a construct you're putting in your channel. But tabs let you get to those other resources that you need to get to, even if it's once a month. If you waste time digging for that link that somebody sent you in an email somewhere and other folks on your team would benefit from it, make it a tab. Put it in whatever channel or channels it may make sense. That could be a specific spreadsheet that maybe you and your team are updating all the time. You don't have to dig for it, even in the files tab. You just tab to it right there inside of that channel. Make it easy. Third-party apps. I'm working with some folks that use Jira. Tab to it in Teams. Make it easy. The whole goal of being able to use Teams the way we do and the way we're moving towards even more is we're reducing context switching. I don't have to go open Outlook now to have a conversation with my teammates, right? I can have it in the team right alongside the documentation that we work on together. I don't have to close Teams, open up a browser, and go to maybe a state regulatory site that I need to get to a few times a month. I can have that right there inside of Teams. The more context, okay, I'm going to say that backwards. The less context switching we do, the more focused we're able to stay inside of the day. And it's just the more efficient our day will go. So if we start to break down the architecture looking at SharePoint and Teams, we see that we can use those SharePoint communication sites to be organization-wide. I call them company public. If anyone in the company needs to be able to consume information, throw it on a communication site. You cannot groupify or teamify a communication site. I kind of call it like clean. It's like the cleanest kind of site that you can create because it doesn't get those groups there. But we use it to broadcast information to everyone. Read only for the org. If you're using Yammer for communities of interest or areas of learning, the new Yammer web parts are really great. Throw those on those pages to invite people to engage with those communities. Team sites are for teams or groups or functional business areas or business units, whatever you call yourselves internally. It's where you come together as a smaller group where you need to work away from the prying eyes of the organization and get stuff done. Communicate, collaborate, real time. Gives you your document management where you can do approvals, track your versioning, right? Get your metadata out of the names and put it in the columns. Metadata is wonderful, and it definitely lends towards long-term document management. Teams gives you the access to that team-centric documentation. And once you start to build out those channels, have all the resources that you need any given day, just the amount of looking around to find those other resources reduces, and just the return on investment of learning those new skill sets, it's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to take a look at this question we have here. When a team has external people, we have different disciplines that we don't want to share information with. A construction project. A project manager needs access to everything, but we want to have a third-party consultants that have access to their particular channels, engineering, electrical, mechanical. In this case, we would have 3 private channels. Is this organizational structure in the team a bad thing? What's the downside? It seems like private channels are not recommended. So I'm going to 100% give you a consultant answer, and I'm glad we're virtual because you can't throw anything at me. It depends. You want third-party folks to have access to their channel. So engineers could go into that project team, get to the engineering documentation, but not to other things they don't have any business seeing. In the future, I think that might end up being a share. No, what is it? A Teams Connect? Isn't that what it is, Sharon? The Teams Connect shared channels? But I mean, that seems legit to me the way you're using it now. Yep. Okay, cool. I would ask, I don't think it matters, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway. If you're using multiple teams and team sites for this, if you haven't yet, consider hubifying those inside of SharePoint, just so your project managers and the people working on those multiple projects kind of have an easy way to get back and forth between them. But yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense to me. If you already have a team site, a modern team site out there, and you know you want Teams, don't go to Teams first. If you've already got that existing site, you can actually turn that site into a teamified site. You can do it from inside of your SharePoint site. If you ever notice, there's a little banner that pops up in that bottom left-hand corner that's just begging you to add a team. You can do it there, or you can absolutely go to Teams and connect to an Office 365 group. You just wouldn't want to start from scratch. And then once we get into the architecture, we've got our teams built out associated with our team sites. We see that everything starts to be connected, even though everything is its own construct inside of the architecture. So we have our communication sites, we have our teams, and we have our associated team sites. Again, these are examples. So those gray boxes, those are just labels that call out a department. But human resources may break out and have a communication site and maybe 3 or 4 teams and team sites. And that's absolutely appropriate because they need those security boundaries between sites to be able to work as departments. And we see it going on in chat talking about those private channels. Yes, there will be additional sites that are created for those private channels. Now, I will say, it's been a minute since I looked, but the last time I looked about 90 days ago, private channel sites don't show up in the admin center. That may have changed recently. But last time I looked, they were not yet discoverable through the admin center. I'm sure someone could write a really good PowerShell script to go find those and show them. But as of recently, they don't show up. All right. And that is going to bring me to the end of my presentation. Ooh, Nate, how does Viva Connections fit into your architecture, or does it? Any advice in implementing that? Oh. I'm so excited about Viva Connections. So for those of you that don't know, once you designate a home site as a true home site, right? Whatever site you're using for your homepage, you then can run a PowerShell script that basically uses Viva Connections. We were going to call it the SharePoint Home app, but it brings that home site into Teams, and actually it brings your whole architecture into Teams. So Sharon, I told you this was going to happen. I decided to share through Teams, and then I decided I needed to demo something. So bear with me for just a minute, and I'm going to change what I'm sharing, because we all knew this was going to happen. Share content, because we did this with Pate with our homepage. I love it when it asks me if I want to share screen 1 or screen 2, but it doesn't show me which is which. Yay, I picked the right one. So right here, you see our Pate logo. We need a better one for connections. That's Viva Connections. It's bringing my home site into Teams. Basically, it's bringing my intranet into Teams. Lightning fast bandwidth here in the Osage Hills of Oklahoma. That's fantastic. There we go. So here we are on our home page inside of Teams. Now we don't have the global navigation configured yet. That would show up here. So we're still using the site navigation. But yeah, now, again, I have my intranet inside of Teams. Corporate communication folks love this because it's kind of been a fear of, okay, so we're all going to go to Teams now. Is anyone ever going to go to the homepage again? What's going to happen? What do we do? You can absolutely bring your news and information into SharePoint using tabs, or into Teams, I should say, using tabs. But by utilizing Viva Connections, it's just right here for folks, and it's that very top button by default. Really is great. Okay. Going to stop sharing my screen now. Yes, Sharon, make sure your home site is the root site first. If your root site is still classic and you've started utilizing a different site, maybe it's /site/home or something like that, there's a PowerShell script that will let you do a site swap to pick that site you've been using and move it and drop it down at the root. And they just kind of switch places. So there are things you can do to kind of fix that if you've kind of been going on that other direction. Not a problem. You can absolutely do that pretty lightweight. Does Viva support all the security trimmings like audience targeting links? Absolutely. It's basically like a browser window inside of Teams. So any audience targeting, security trimming, all that good stuff absolutely is going to be respected when you bring your intranet site home. Even on your quick links and your news, your audience targeting on your news articles, all that just rides on rails. It's pretty fantastic. I'm so excited. I mean, I'm legit a SharePoint geek. I do love me some Teams, but being able to combine both of those, yes. When a project comes to end of life and you want to archive it, do you have to archive the private channel sites separately? So typically what happens is, okay, so see, I feel like I'm like back to, it depends. You would archive, if you archive your team, all of it, all the channels in the team become archived. If you are wanting to leave the SharePoint site read-only, which is an option if you do a manual archive, I don't know. I need to go do it. Sharon, have you ever done the archive through Teams when you had private channels? I don't know.
I believe that it archives the team as a whole, and it will mark everything as read-only, including the private channel content.
Right. I'm just wondering about if you choose to leave the SharePoint active.
I've never done that for private channels. I'd have to test it too.
Yep.
I would expect that it would follow whatever you tell it to do.
Should.
If you leave it, it'll leave it. I mean, the great thing is all it's really doing is changing the permissions. So if after the fact you didn't like it, you could go in and just change the permissions back in SharePoint.
And it's pretty manual to do it through Teams. I'm a big fan of creating actually a archive flow. Put some metadata in those libraries. Archive, yes, no. When you're at end of life, go through, mark what should be archived as archive, and go kick off that flow. Grab what you need and put it in a designated archive location where most of your users don't have access to it anymore, so it's not cluttering up their search. And just kind of create a process that works for you and your project teams. Archive is a big topic right now at Pate Group. You have to decide as an organization what you want your archive process to be. Just yeah, that's a perfect gift, Jonathan. It's like, do you want to archive in SharePoint? Well, if you do that and you don't pull people away from it, now all that archive stuff's always going to be in search. That's annoying. Do you want to archive to a file share? I like that idea because it keeps my search clean, but now you've still got on-prem servers you got to maintain. I don't like that. Azure Files, that seems like a really good option, but additional skill sets, right? So it's just talk it through. Ability to archive channels. Oh, yes. Now, the Teams product team is leaving user voice up for a while. So those of you that heard user voice is going away, not for Teams. So that's legit. Thank you, Nate. Any other questions, comments, stories? Come on, Teams, trying to get my window bigger. It's a fun topic for sure. My left rail, how many apps do I have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 10 apps now pinned to my left rail, including Yammer and Insights. There's so much. Teams has grown so much over the last year and a half. It's really impressive. And it's just getting better every day. So, and for those of you, like many of us, we were talking about it earlier, you kind of struggle with some of the performance sometimes. There is kind of a re-architecture for Teams coming that will improve that. I assume archive sites count towards the overall SharePoint storage. The pricing for additional storage has not come down. Any tips on cost management? As Teams keeps growing, I can see prices will become an issue for some organizations. I think I think Azure file storage would be cheaper. Don't quote me. Seriously, don't quote me, but I think so. If you think your organization is going to maintain an on-prem file storage, it's going to be cheaper. Throw your archive stuff there. Only give certain people access to that, though. When we archive content, let's say legal has been consulted. We know how long we need to keep certain types of information. We have that policy in place, retention policy is there, we run it, we move stuff to the file share. We need to know if our business users are still going back to access that content. Because why did we archive it if we still need it? So by having a request process in place, it keeps us aware of what people are using. I realize I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, David, in response to your question, but it's kind of been top of mind for us. So making sure we're keeping track of who's doing what, who's accessing what. If we know for a fact no one has touched this stuff in a year, there have been 0 requests for it. Legal says we're good to go. Maybe after a year, it's good enough. We can just, right? Do we ever delete anything? I don't know, but it's an option. And Sharon's saying use retention planning policies, have a tiered storage process for deleting and offloading to cheaper storage solutions, limit the number of versions. And my, should I say cohort or coworker, Stephen Wilson, he's not opposed to telling a group, hey, put it on writable storage, hand it on a thumb drive and hand it off and say, here's your archive. Do with it whatever you want, but we're getting it off the server. We're getting it out of SharePoint.
I actually give that answer a lot, Joy.
Just take it.
People will say, "What should I do with this?" And I'm like, "Do you need it, or are you just retaining it for because you have a retention policy that you have to?" And they're like, "We just have to keep it." I'm like, "Burn it to a DVD and put it in a drawer."
Yep. Check that box and move on.
What 4 terabyte storage drives are like $50.
Which is ridiculous. It kills me how cheap that storage is these days. It's awesome. But yeah, but don't archive in SharePoint where everybody has access to it still. It just becomes a mess. And we've heard for so long, search sucks. Okay, well, get rid of the crap. Unnest those deep folders. Not only will search get better, but so will performance.
That's actually a good tip. I'll put it in here. Search only goes 3 folders deep. So if anybody wants a good reason to get rid of folders, or at least limit folders,
Limit. Just do it. Metadata is your best friend because, especially with the new filter, I mean, it's been there for a few years now, but that little filter button in your lists and libraries now, when you show your business users that you can not just sort and filter based on those columns, but you can slice and dice data just like you would a spreadsheet. I mean, it is legit mind blown. And they start to get it. Now, I'm not a spreadsheet person, but just knowing I could go in there, I don't have to dig through folders anymore. I can just say, I want this year, this category, this department, boom, everything on one flat pane of glass. Yes, yes. It is hard, Jason. It is hard. I actually had to have a conversation with a CIO recently because they want to migrate to SharePoint, but they don't want anything to change. It's going to change. It has to change. And if I was like, do you really want to spend the money we're looking at spending to backwards engineer SharePoint to match 30-year-old processes? Why are we building to be legacy? Why are we backwards engineering something? And for him, those were the words, and he went, "Oh, yeah, you're investing in a modern tool set. Use it."